Welcome back to the channel. This week's video is something special. I've managed to get my hands on an amazing new bike. And I say new because this is literally the only one of its kind in the UK. But I have a feeling it won't be the only one for long. So today we're going to test ride this mystery bike in some interesting places and talk about how you can get your hands on it. And like any good bike test, this one was a blast. So without any further delay, let me introduce you to the Chromag Darco. This snazzy looking machine is known as a full suspension bike made for hardtail riders. All the fun of a hardtail, but with the added enjoyment of suspension. We're talking 150mm up front, 120 in the rear, and a hardy pair of 29-inch wheels at each end. Connecting these together is a beautiful steel and alloy frame in this amazing olive green. With the slack head tube and seat tube angles, this bike promises to be as good uphill as it is down. Two things I plan on testing today. There are also loads of other great parts on this bike, but when you get one of these built in the UK, you can add almost any part that you want, so the world really is your oyster. Now that we've taken a quick look at the bike, let's get down to business. To test the Darco, I'm heading to the hills. My first test is going to be on a chilled out downhill section. I want to get a feel for the bike before I really put it to the test on something a bit harder. I always find that when I'm changing to a different bike, it takes me a couple of runs to really get a feel for what the bike is all about. You get used to the weight of it, the geometry, and how the components are all working together to tackle the terrain. One of the first things I notice about this bike is that it's fast. It's definitely quick through the corners, and as you can see, it's really playful. From this bike's hardtail-like reputation, it's no surprise that it performs well on trails like this. Of course, the smooth surface of Lower Cliff was no challenge for the Chromag. As my first run was coming to an end, the speed and agility weren't the only thing that I'd noticed. This bike is also surprisingly comfortable.
So this thing is fully spec'd out in Chromag. As well as the frame, you've got things like the bars, the grips, the seat. It's all Chromag, and I have to say, it really works. Super comfortable.
So after getting a feel for the Darco on the first trail, I went looking for something a bit more interesting and a bit more natural. I wanted something with a few lumps and bumps that would be a much better testing ground for this bike. And that's exactly what I found. This trail is a bit of a weather-beaten mess, full of small lumps and bumps, perfect for testing the suspension and the ride feel. With the vibe of a full suspension hardtail, the Darco strikes a nice balance. The suspension is enough to make the ride smoother and allow you to hit interesting features, but it still allows you to feel like you're riding on the trail rather than over it. You're protected from trail bumps, but you're still able to pump rollers and corner easily. This is also a really responsive bike. It's well in tune with your body movements and it's ready to go as soon as you make a move. Perfect for making those unexpected trail corrections. Initially, I wasn't expecting the bike to be this agile, but it's certainly something I enjoy. So far, I'm pretty impressed.
That was awesome.
Funnily enough, one of my favourite parts of this bike came when it was time to head back up the hill again.
This bike climbs so well. This is genuinely one of the best bikes I've ever ridden for climbing. It's an absolute machine. It makes me realise how sluggish my normal bike is. Honestly, this is great.
Yes, this bike climbs like a beast, and it's all down to that seat tube geometry that I was telling you about earlier. It puts you right over the bottom bracket, great for climbing. But enough of the uphill. Heading into the next trail, it was time to crank things up a notch, with a rougher trail and some airtime. This is another natural trail, but it demands a bit more respect than the first one. After a casual top section, this trail gets a bit more spicy, with some steep descents, jumps and drops. So at this point, I should say that this is not a sponsored video. No one's paid me to say any of this. I managed to borrow this bike from Adventure Trails bike shop in Kimber, whilst my bike's in having a much needed service. They build and sell all kinds of Chromag bikes there, and I was lucky enough to wangle myself a couple of days on the Darco, so I consider myself pretty darn lucky. On a trail like this, the Darco's comfortable yet aggressive stance provides you with plenty of control. It certainly gave me the confidence to ride a few of these features that require a bit more skill. It's safe to say that this bike is already making an impression on me. Like I said, this may be the first of its kind in the UK, but more on the way as we speak, so it certainly won't be the last. Over the course of the next couple of hours, I rode as many interesting natural trails as possible, and the Darco took them all well within its stride. I was really starting to enjoy how the bike feels downhill, and with its superb climbing ability, you can really maximise your time on the trails. I've ridden a couple of small jumps on this bike so far and it feels good, but something's missing from my test. So I've tried the Darco at the trail centre, I've ridden it down some sketchy natural trails, and now it's time to hit some jumps. Let's go. This is the skills area at Newbold Common. It has 2 lines of jumps. Keen to test the jumping ability of the Darco, I decided to ride the smaller line first. With a couple of tabletops and some smooth berms, this should be interesting. Forgetting just how fast this bike is on smooth terrain, I went into these jumps a little too fast. But this is where I found out how amazingly this bike loves to pop into the air. Jumping is effortless. After that run, it's time to try the bigger line. This bike generates an awesome amount of speed on smooth trails like this, and it's effortless to get into the air. It genuinely caught me by surprise how easily this bike pops off the lip and perfectly settles itself into the landing. Before I got to ride this bike, for some reason I assumed it would be heavy, but it really isn't. And it definitely feels like a bike with way more suspension than 120mm.
That was dreamy. That was so smooth. This bike is amazing to jump in.
To make sure it wasn't a fluke, I gave that run another go. And like clockwork, the Darco sprang into the air with minimal effort and delicately placed itself back on the landing. This bike jumps so well. I feel like I hardly need any speed going into these jumps. On my normal full sus, I would be going way faster to clear these, but on the Darco, everything feels so smooth. I've ridden Chromag hardtails in the past, and they've always been awesome, but this bike is something else. It's comfortable, capable, and really enjoyable. All the good parts of a hardtail, but on a full suspension bike.
Man, I could ride this bike on jumps all day. That is so smooth. It's like riding a marshmallow, genuinely. I'm surprised how amazing that is.
So it's safe to say that I really enjoyed this Chromag Darco. It was everything that I expected from a bike of its reputation. Now, I'll link Adventure Trails down in the video description. This is where I got the bike from. They know everything there is to know about the Chromag range. These are the guys to talk to if you have any questions. I mean, they literally build every type of Chromag there, so go and check them out. So that's it from me. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Oh yeah.